air was thick and sweet with the scent of crushed olives and sun-warmed earth. It was a late September evening in Puglia. The light, the famous golden hour, was doing its best work, spilling a honey glow over the ancient stone farmhouse of the Ferrari family. Under the sprawling, twisted branches of a centuries-old olive tree, Anna and Marco stood, their hands clasped so tightly their knuckles were white. The ceremony was small, deliberately so, almost a defiance. The diamond was tiny, but the promise was huge. This was their engagement, their quiet, rebellious covenant. Anna's dress was a simple cream linen, Marco's suit a dark, well-worn grey. This simplicity was a silent declaration against the lavish, expected spectacle her father desired. Anna looked up at Marco. His eyes, the colour of the Mediterranean after a storm, held a fierce, protective love. He was the anchor that allowed her to dream. She gave a small private nod, a signal that this, right now, was enough. But the silence was heavy, not with reverence, but with unresolved tension. The two families stood separate, distinct islands in the warm Italian evening. The Ferraris, led by Paolo, Anna's father, were stiff, immaculate, dressed in dark, expensive clothes. They embodied the ancient, unyielding wealth of the land. They were the keepers of the law. The Vitalis, Marco's mother, Teresa, and his younger brother, Leo, were warmer, more open, their clothes lighter, their laughter quicker. They were the innovators, closer to the earth and the wind. Paolo Ferrari raised a glass of his own family's crisp, expensive wine. His voice was too loud, too formal for the intimate setting. To the joining of two of the region's oldest names, a long overdue partnership. He avoided looking directly at Teresa Vitali. The word partnership hung in the air, a cruel, heavy joke. Everyone knew the history. The names hadn't been partners for 15 years. They had been enemies. Marco squeezed Anna's hand. He raised his own glass, not of wine, but of clear spring water from his farm's well. To Anna and Marco, to a future where the past is only a story, not a blueprint. It was a direct, respectful challenge to Paolo. Anna felt a familiar tremor of fear and pride run through her. Marco was always like this, courageous, unyielding, a force of nature. The toast broke the spell. The families mingled, but the interaction was strained, polite. Anna drifted away, drawn by an instinct. She went into the cool, dark stillness of the old Ferrari farmhouse. She needed a moment away from the scrutiny, the inherited judgments. She climbed the narrow wooden stairs to the attic, dust motes dancing in the single shaft of moonlight from a broken shutter. She went straight to the old carved wooden chest. Inside, hidden beneath moth-eaten linens, lay the relics of her true, secret aspiration. A clunky, vintage film camera. It belonged to her late uncle Piero, the artistic black sheep of the Ferrari family, who had left the farm years ago, chasing light and shadow, and never returned alive. Anna ran her fingers over the smooth metal casing. She hadn't picked it up in years. She had traded her filmmaking dreams for stability, for the quiet respectability of teaching. The camera felt cold, a ghost of the life she had abandoned. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound came from the lens, a tiny inscription, almost rubbed away. P and V, a promise. Anna quickly closed the chest, her heart fluttering. She could not decipher the meaning, but the V felt too close to Vitali to be a coincidence. Downstairs, Anna found her Nonna Elena sitting alone on the veranda, staring at the ancient olive tree. Nonna Elena was fragile, her memory unreliable, a living relic of the family's true history. Anna knelt beside her. "Nonna, are you happy for us?" Anna whispered, resting her head on the old woman's knee. Nonna Elena touched Anna's face, her hand like dry olive leaves. Her eyes were distant, focused on the twisted trunk of the tree. "The olive tree," she murmured, her voice a fragile rasp. "It has heard the vows twice, my little one. Only once were they kept whole." Anna frowned. "Twice? Who else, Nonna?" Nonna Elena blinked, the moment of lucidity gone, replaced by a gentle confusion. "Paolo will be cross if you are late. He has a paper for Marco, a very important paper." Anna stood up, the old woman's words chilling her. She dismissed the twice as Nonna's wandering mind, but the mention of Paolo and a paper felt immediately menacing. She hurried back to the reception area. Marco was standing opposite Paolo. The golden light was gone, replaced by the stark, unforgiving illumination of the porch lamps. The tension was palpable, a dark current in the air. Paolo had a thick document in his hand, bound in expensive leather. "It is a simple formality, Marco," Paolo said, his voice clipped and precise. "A prenuptial agreement. Standard practice for families of our standing." Marco did not touch the document. "I understand a prenup, Paolo, but this is not an agreement. This is a fortress." Paolo smiled, a chilling expression that did not reach his eyes. "It guarantees Anna's future, should the worst occur. And it guarantees the integrity of the Ferrari legacy." He tapped the document's cover. "The core clause is simple. Marco Vitali agrees in perpetuity never to interfere with, advise on, or acquire any ownership in the management or land holdings of the Ferrari family." Anna felt the blood drain from her face. It was not just a prenup, it was a total severance. It was a public declaration that Marco's family, and by extension Marco himself, was not trusted. It was a renewed affirmation of the old feud. It reduced their marriage to a purely emotional arrangement, forbidden from ever touching the sacred ground of business and legacy. Marco took a breath that was too long, too slow. He looked not at the paper, but straight into Paolo's eyes. His gaze was cold steel. "You do not trust me, Paolo." Marco stated. A fact, not a question. Paolo's smile widened. Trust is earned, Marco, not given with a wedding band. Marco glanced at Anna, his love mixed with hurt and bewilderment. He looked at the paper, then back at Paolo. I will not sign it. Marco's refusal hung heavy in the warm night air. An invisible stone dropped into a still pool. The polite facade of the engagement party shattered. Paolo Ferrari's face hardened, the skin around his mouth tightening into a thin, pale line. A refusal is a declaration of intent, Marco, Paolo said, his voice dangerously low. It tells me that you still cling to the grudge of your father, that you are seeking entry not for my daughter, but for my land. That is a lie, Marco countered, taking a step forward. I'm seeking entry for Anna. Nothing more, nothing less. Your land is yours, Paolo. I have my own. He clenched his fists, struggling to keep his simmering Vitali passion from boiling over. Anna stepped quickly between them, placing a hand on Marco's chest, feeling the frantic beat of his heart against her palm. Papa, please. This is about Marco and me, not about the past, not about the farms. Paolo turned his gaze to his daughter, his disappointment a physical, suffocating weight. Everything in this family, Anna, is about the farm. It is the blood in our veins. If he cannot respect the boundary, he cannot respect our life. His father learnt that lesson the hard way 15 years ago. The mention of Marco's late father, Luca Vitali, was a deliberate, brutal blow. Marco shoved the document away with a sharp movement. My father died trying to set things right, Paolo, a truth you conveniently forget. Truth? Your father's truth cost me acres. He tried to swindle me out of the ancient road to the western field. He was a liar, and he was a thief of good will. Paolo spat the words out, the old hatred rising up, fresh and venomous. Anna pulled Marco away. Marco, stop. Let's go. She dragged him toward the vineyard, away from the watchful, judgmental eyes of her remaining family and their staff. They stopped among the neat, disciplined rows of Ferrari vines. Marco was shaking with suppressed rage. He is poisoning everything, Anna, Marco whispered, leaning his head against a wooden post, staring up at the moon. He will never let go of that field. He will never let go of the idea that my father ruined him. Anna wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. I know he is difficult, but we are here. We are together. We don't need his contract. We don't need his blessing. I don't care about his money or his land, Anna. I care about what he thinks of me. He sees me as a parasite, waiting for a crack in his fortress, and if I sign that paper, I admit that he is right. Marco turned, holding her face in his strong hands. I have my own dream, my own piece of land I want to develop, the old parcel next to the Chiesa Vecchia, the one that used to be Vitali land, the one your father acquired 15 years ago. Anna's eyes widened. That was the core of the dispute. Why that field, Marco? It's just rocks. Not to me. It is beautiful. And Anna, Marco's voice softened, becoming urgent, full of suppressed hope. I want to buy it back and I want to build a small studio there for you. A proper, soundproof space. A place where you can use Piero's camera, a place where you can make your films, your art, away from the pressure of the Ferraris, away from the dust of the olives. A place that is only yours. That's my legacy to you. Anna felt a rush of emotion, a mix of profound love and overwhelming panic. This was Marco's counter-proposal to the prenup. Not to take, but to give, to reclaim their family's fractured history for a good purpose. But it meant directly challenging Paolo's ownership, confirming his deepest fear. Marco, if you try to buy back that land, Papa will see it as an act of war, Anna pleaded, her voice cracking. It already is an act of war, Anna, Marco said, gesturing toward the main road. Just then, the head field foreman, Domenico, stormed into the vineyard, his face pale and angry. Paolo! Paolo! The main aqueduct line is blocked, completely dry. It's the valve on the communal path. Domenico yelled toward the farmhouse. It can only be blocked from the Vitali side. The air froze. Paolo strode back to the porch, his face now a mask of fury and vindication. See, Marco, see how they act. They starve our young vines to spite us. Marco looked back, bewildered. We didn't touch the aqueduct. We need that water too. Paolo dismissed him with a contemptuous wave. Go back to your mother. Marco, tell her the games stop now. The wedding is delayed until this misunderstanding is resolved and until that document is signed. Anna watched Marco walk away, his back straight, his shoulders rigid with pride and indignation. She knew he hadn't touched the water line, but the evidence was against him, woven into the fabric of the old feud. Later that night, unable to sleep, Anna returned to Nonna Elena's room. The old woman was asleep. Clutching a small, tarnished silver box, Anna gently took the box and opened it. Inside were pressed flowers, a dried ribbon, and several brittle, handwritten letters dated 30 years ago. The letters were from Paolo, her father, to his own father. They detailed a complicated deal for a new irrigation system and a land swap with the Vitalis. The original plan was for the Ferraris to give the Vitalis the contested Western Field in exchange for a water right easement and money. Anna's grandfather had signed a tentative agreement, but Paolo's letters detailed his own subsequent frantic efforts to cancel the exchange and ensure Vitali gets nothing but the blame. The reasons were vague, referencing protecting the future and a dangerous influence. Anna sat there, the letters shaking in her hands. The feud wasn't about theft. It was about a broken agreement, engineered by her own father. And why? A small, cryptic postscript was scribbled on the margin of the final letter, in a different handwriting. Nonna Elena's. Paolo, you broke the boy's promise to Piero. You broke the truth. Piero, her artistic uncle. Piero and V from the camera. The boy's promise. Nonna Elena's voice echoed in her mind. Don't believe what people say about the dead. The dead were Luca Vitali and Piero Ferrari. Anna felt a new, cold fear. The story of the stolen land was a lie her father had meticulously crafted and maintained. The next morning, Anna confronted her father in the cellar, where the precious aging bottles lay. "The water line, Papa. Did you block it?" Anna asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. Paolo continued wiping dust from a bottle of Barolo. "I'm protecting our land, Anna. They are testing us. They always have." "Did Marco's father steal that land?" she pressed. Paolo stopped and looked at her, his eyes cold and devoid of warmth. "He made a mistake that almost ruined us. I corrected it. That is all you need to know." He then pointed a finger at the wine. "This wine, Anna, is your inheritance. This land is your inheritance. You marry Marco with that contract signed. You get the land and the life we built for you. You marry him without it, defying the trust of your father, refusing to accept the protection of your family. Then you will not inherit anything. You will be free, Anna, but you will also be alone." Paolo's ultimatum, the land or the love, had a strange clarifying effect on Anna. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a sharper, fiercer resentment. She was tired of the fear being a blueprint for her life. Marco's dream of the studio, his offer to build her freedom, resonated deeply. She realized that by trying to keep the peace, she had only been enabling the lie. She found Marco at his farmhouse, sitting on the porch swing, the air around him heavy with defeat. He had just finished repairing the communal water line, a silent act of grace and proof of his innocence. But his efforts were met with only cold suspicion from the Ferrari side. Anna sat next to him and took his hand. "We are not signing the paper, Marco." Marco looked at her, his expression a mixture of surprise and caution. "Anna, your father will disinherit you. Your whole life, this farm, everything gone." "It was never mine," Anna whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It belongs to the fear, and to a lie about a field and a promise that was broken years ago. My father is protecting a story, not me. I choose the truth, Marco. I choose you." Their decision was immediate and absolute. They would not have the grand, traditional wedding that Paolo demanded, nor the modern spectacle Marco's mother half hoped for. They would host a small, intimate ceremony, self-funded, modest, defiant, right where they had gotten engaged. Under the ancient olive tree that had witnessed all the secrets, all the vows, and all the broken promises. The news spread through the small, tightly knit community of Puglia like wildfire carried on the sirocco wind. The response was immediate and deeply uncomfortable. The elders whispered in the piazza. The shopkeepers gave Anna sympathetic, pitying looks. A wedding without a proper dowry or an inherited name is just a common law meeting, Anna, the baker, Signora Rossi, told her, handing her the bread for the pre-wedding dinner. "You need the blessing of the roots, otherwise the fruit will be sour." The pressure was immense, a silent, communal disapproval that felt heavier than any single argument with Paolo. Anna and Marco understood the cost of challenging tradition. It wasn't just losing inheritance. It was losing the good standing, the respect that defined their world. Anna found strength in her rebellion. She returned to the attic, driven by the need to understand the true roots of the feud. She opened Uncle Piero's wooden chest again. She wanted to know the man her father had been so afraid of. Piero's artifacts were few: the old camera, the letters, and beneath a stack of faded landscape sketches, a small, worn, leather-bound diary. The pages were filled not with words, but with the detailed drawings, architectural sketches, and philosophical musings about light, community, and preservation. Anna realized Piero hadn't been a simple artist. He was a visionary. His sketches detailed plans for sustainable farming, for integrating old architecture with modern living, ideas that were a direct contradiction to Paolo's rigid, production-focused methods. On the final, untouched page of the diary, Anna found what she was looking for. Tucked inside was a single, grainy, black-and-white photograph. It was taken about 20 years ago. In the photo stood a young Piero, smiling, his arm around another young man. The second man had the strong jawline and intense eyes of the Vitali family. Marco's father, Luca, when he was just a young man. They weren't rivals. They were friends. Best friends, standing side by side, radiating youthful optimism. In front of them, on a small wooden table, was a detailed miniature model of the very old, abandoned church, the Chiesa Vecchia, Marco had mentioned wanting to restore. The model was intricate, showing a complete revitalization plan, including a community center and a public arts space. This was the dangerous influence Paolo had feared, the collaboration, the shared dream that transcended the family feud. Under the photo, Piero had written a single elegiac sentence: "The olive tree will be the proof of our honesty. We will build, not divide, under its shadow." The truth hit Anna with the force of a physical blow. The truth her father corrected was the truth of collaboration. The disagreement 15 years ago hadn't been about land theft. It was about Paolo's betrayal of his brother, Piero, and his lifelong friend, Luca Vitali, to maintain the Ferrari-only legacy. Paolo didn't want Anna to be influenced by Piero's unconventional dreams, and he certainly didn't want the Vitalis involved in his family's affairs. He broke the promise, then fabricated the lie of theft to bury the evidence. Anna realized the vows heard twice, Nonna Elena spoke of, were not 2 wedding ceremonies, but the original promise between Piero and Luca to build their future together, broken by Paolo, and now the vow between Anna and Marco to build their own future. She felt a surge of adrenaline, a profound sense of clarity. She didn't just have to marry Marco, she had to finish the work of Piero and Luca. She had to correct the historical lie that had been suffocating her family for 2 decades. She showed the diary and the photo to Marco. Marco's eyes, fixed on the youthful, hopeful face of his father next to Piero, welled up. They weren't fighting over soil, Anna. They were fighting over soul. The next day, Anna and Marco spent hours planning their ceremony. It was a simple, beautiful declaration of independence. The date was set, the arrangements made. The sun set on the eve of their wedding day. A perfect, peaceful end to the chaos. Anna was packing the last of her few personal belongings, preparing to leave the Ferrari home for good, when a panicked, desperate shriek tore through the night silence. It was Domenico, the foreman. Anna and Paolo rushed out onto the veranda. The night was moonless, dark, and ominous. Paolo had recently installed new security lights around the younger groves of olive saplings, planted just last year, symbolizing the new growth and Ferrari's future. Under the harsh white glare of the security lamps, they saw the devastation. Not all of the trees, but a specific row of the newest, most precious saplings had been brutally hacked down. The small green leaves lay scattered on the ground. The fresh cuts gleamed wetly in the artificial light. It was a vicious, targeted attack on the future of the Ferrari farm. Domenico was screaming, pointing toward the path that led directly to the Vitali property. It's them, the Vitalis. They did this. They want to ruin us. Paolo's face was frozen in a mask of terrible, righteous rage. He looked at Anna, then back at the destruction. The accusation was already formed, ironclad, irreversible. This is your love, Anna, Paolo said, his voice a low, gravelly threat. This is the chaos you invite into our lives. Marco's refusal to sign the contract, his father's grudge. This is their answer to your defiance. Anna stood paralyzed, staring at the destroyed young trees, the silent victims of the escalating feud. The wedding was hours away, and the final brutal act of sabotage had just been committed. She knew Marco was innocent, but she knew the accusation would stick. She looked down at the dark earth, and there, barely visible against a freshly turned mound of soil, was a small metallic flash. She bent down and picked it up. It was a simple silver cigarette lighter. Engraved on its side, the single elegant cursive letter V. Anna đã khám phá ra sự thật về chú Piero và cha Marco. Họ là bạn và có chung một ước mơ đã bị cha cô, Paolo, phá vỡ, Seed, Pa. Cô và Marco quyết định tổ chức lễ cưới nhỏ để tuyên ngôn. Đêm trước ngày cưới, trang trại Ferrari bị phá hoại. Anna tìm thấy bằng chứng, chiếc bật lửa Vitali và cha cô ngay lập tức buộc tội Marco. Đây là điểm ngắt hợp lý đưa đến chuỗi hành động và sự đổ vỡ của hội thai. Marco did not answer his phone. Anna stayed under the abandoned olive tree for a long time, the silver lighter feeling like a branding iron in her palm. The silence Marco had left behind was heavier than Paolo's loudest anger. She had chosen silence over trust, and the price was their near-perfect love. Desperate, Anna finally drove away from the farm, leaving a note for Nonna Elena saying she would return soon. She drove for hours, leaving the rolling hills of Puglia for the starker, industrial landscape further north. She was chasing a name Marco had mentioned in passing, Massimo Rossi, an old friend of his father and Piero, the architect who had supposedly helped design the Chiesa Vecchia project. She found Massimo in a small, cluttered studio in Bari, surrounded by rolls of blueprints and plaster dust. He was a man in his late 60s, with kind eyes and hands stained permanently with ink. Anna introduced herself as Piero's niece and Marco Vitali's fiancée. Massimo's eyes instantly softened. He pulled out a dusty portfolio. Inside were the original, immense blueprints for the Chiesa Vecchia Cultural Center. Piero and Luca, Massimo murmured, tracing the lines of a communal garden plan. Two visionaries, one a poet of stone, the other a poet of the soil. They were going to build something that defined modern Italy, Anna. A cooperative, a living testament to the fact that two families could create more than they could hoard. Anna showed him the old photograph. Massimo nodded, his face shadowed with memory. "This is the day the promise was truly made," he said, "and this is the project that Paolo Ferrari destroyed." Anna asked why. Massimo looked at her, his expression pitying. "It wasn't about money, my dear. It was about fear. Paolo saw Piero's art, Luca's innovation, and realized they were a force of change he couldn't control. His brother, Piero, was constantly challenging the traditions of the Ferrari name. He was the one who was supposed to marry Luca's sister, a long ago broken arrangement. Paolo was convinced that if this cultural center succeeded, Piero would return, Marco's family would gain immense regional power, and worst of all, you, Anna, who was only a little girl, would be drawn away from the farm, away from the life of a respectable Ferrari heir, into the unstable world of art and film, just like Piero. Massimo paused, sighing heavily. Paolo didn't want his daughter to abandon the farm for a camera like his brother had. He saw the project as a magnet pulling you away. He had the power, the connections, and the rigidity to destroy it. He couldn't kill the project overtly, so he killed the agreement, invented the lie of land theft, and made Luca Vitali the scapegoat. Luca, to protect the last bit of honor for his family and his friendship with Piero, took the public blame. Piero left and never looked back. He died alone, chasing light, a broken man. Anna felt the sickness rise in her throat. The land was only a tool. The real motive was control, a father's crippling fear disguised as protection, and a monstrous ego. Her father had sacrificed her uncle's life and her future husband's family honor just to keep her safely rooted in his version of the truth. She thanked Massimo, the blueprints of the great broken dream heavy in her hands, and drove straight back to the Ferrari farm. She found Paolo in his office, reviewing security footage on a new monitor he'd installed. "The cameras are working now, Anna," Paolo said, not looking up. "We will catch the man who did this. We will find your Vitali vandal." Anna stood in the doorway, the truth burning a hole through her chest. "The vandal is you, Papa." Paolo finally looked up, his expression a mixture of feigned shock and rising anger. "What did that boy put in your head? Get out!" "You did this to Piero, and you did this to Luca," Anna continued, her voice gaining strength, steel replacing the tremor. "You broke the agreement. You lied about the land and you ruined the cultural center because you were afraid I would choose a camera over a vineyard. You were afraid I would become like Piero. I know everything." Paolo stood up, leaning over his desk, his face red with suppressed rage. "This is ingratitude, Anna. I built this empire for you. I protected you from the weakness of the artist, from the chaos of the Vitali's ideas. They wanted to take our roots. I gave you stability. I gave you a future. You gave me a cage," Anna screamed, her own tears finally breaking through. "And you gave Marco a lie. You destroyed those saplings, Papa. You created this crisis to force me to cancel the wedding and sign your paper. You are the coward, not Marco." "I am your father," Paolo roared, slamming his fist down. "And you are the most ungrateful, greedy child. You want to take the land and run off with that dreamer. You want to destroy the Ferrari name." Anna stared at him, unable to breathe. He was deflecting, twisting her moral accusation into a material one. Greed. She couldn't break him with the truth. Suddenly, a small, fragile voice interrupted the storm. "Paolo, figlio mio, don't raise your voice to the child." Nonna Elena was standing at the doorway, fully dressed, perfectly composed. Her eyes, usually vague and clouded, were lucid, sharp, and focused entirely on her son. Paolo froze. The sight of his mother standing there, listening, draining the anger from his face, leaving only terror. "Mama, please, go back to your room. This is between me and Anna." Nonna Elena slowly walked into the room, stopping directly between Paolo and Anna. She spoke with a quiet, terrible authority. "I heard the words, Paolo, and I saw the lights that night. I was watching from the window, the young saplings." Nonna Elena reached out, laying a trembling hand on Paolo's arm. "You did it, Caro. You went out with your pruning shears. You cut the young trees, our own blood. You did it to make the hatred true. You did it so Anna would be safe from love." Paolo looked at his mother, then at Anna, then back at the floor. The elaborate mask of righteous anger crumbled. His shoulders slumped. He did not deny it. The silence confirmed everything. Anna's knees weakened. The initial shock of finding the lighter was nothing compared to this. Her father had not only lied about the past, he had actively, physically sabotaged his own future and framed an innocent man just to control her. He had wounded his own land to maintain his power. Nonna Elena looked at Anna, her expression profoundly sad. "The first vow, my dear, was the vow between two friends, two brothers, to build a future. Your father broke it. He broke the tree's heart, twice now. Go, Anna. Go find the man who still carries the dream." Anna did not look at Paolo again. The realization that the source of her biggest fear was also the source of the biggest betrayal was complete. She turned and walked out of the office, the blueprints and the silver lighter, the symbols of the lie and the promise, held tight against her chest. She had to find Marco. She had to correct her own betrayal of silence. Coup twist. Giữa chân đã được tiết lộ. Chính Paolo là người phá hoại trang trại. Anna đối mặt với cha và bị gọi là tham lam. Nonna Elena tiết lộ sự thật và xác nhận tội lỗi của Paolo. Anna nhận ra sự thật đau đớn và quyết tâm tìm Marco để sửa chữa sai lầm của mình. The work was brutal, silent, and deeply necessary. For the next week, Anna and Marco spent every daylight hour at the Chiesa Vecchia. They communicated in gestures and low, functional instructions, and there were no romantic words, no apologies, only the rhythmic sound of shovels scraping stone and axes cutting ivy. Their shared work was the only language they trusted. Anna learned more about Marco in that week than in the 2 years of their courtship. He didn't just understand agriculture, he understood structure, physics, and preservation. He cleaned the debris with reverence, treating the ruined church not as a relic, but as a wounded patient. Anna, armed with Piero's blueprints, focused on clearing the exact area where the community hall was designed to integrate. They were building a relationship on hard, shared labor, on honoring a dead man's promise. Slowly, subtly, they began to receive help. First, it was Leo, Marco's younger brother, who showed up with 2 buckets of cold water and a box of fresh figs. He didn't say much, just dropped the supplies and went to work, his presence an immediate statement of allegiance. Then an older Vitali cousin, the one who owned the silver lighter, arrived. He didn't confess to the vandalism, but he offered 2 days of labor with his tractor, an unspoken apology for the division his branch of the family had caused. Anna even received covert support from the Ferrari side. Domenico, the foreman who had shrieked in panic over the saplings, drove by one morning. He didn't stop, but a heavy plastic bag was thrown from his truck onto the path. Inside were expensive tools, heavy gloves, a new pickaxe, and a handwritten note, unsigned. Piero's dream was the better harvest. This quiet, gathering support was more frightening to Paolo Ferrari than any direct confrontation. Anna and Marco's small, defiant act was becoming a visible symbol of community healing and a direct challenge to the authority Paolo had built on the foundation of the lie. One late afternoon, as the sun cast long, dusty shadows over the ancient walls, the confrontation finally arrived. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up on the dirt track. Paolo Ferrari emerged, dressed in a pristine white shirt, a man who looked utterly alien in the environment of sweat and earth. He was flanked by his solicitor, a small, nervous man named Guido. Paolo walked straight toward Marco and Anna, stopping right at the edge of the cleared area. "This stops now," Paolo commanded, his voice cutting through the peaceful silence. "This structure, this land, is still contested by proxy. You are trespassing, Marco, and Anna, you are destroying your last chance at a respectable life." Marco straightened up, holding his shovel like a spear. His eyes, fixed on Paolo, were cold and steady. Anna stood beside him, her hands covered in dirt, feeling a strength she had never possessed in the Ferrari farmhouse. "This is not your land, Paolo," Marco stated calmly. "This is community land. It is the land that you and my father fought over, not because of a road, but because of a promise. We are not building a vineyard, Paolo. We are restoring a heritage." Paolo turned to Guido. "Issue the injunction. I want a restraining order immediately. I will have this entire ruin fenced off and declared unsafe. And Anna, you will come home now. The money I spent on the wedding preparations is already gone. But I will still allow you to return to your school. You will not lose everything." "I have already lost everything you offered, Papa," Anna said, her voice clear and unbroken. "And I found something better. I found the truth of my uncle and the truth of your fear." She walked over to a stack of cleared ivy and pulled out the silver lighter she had hidden for so long. She tossed it onto the dirt at Paolo's feet. "You framed Marco with this, Paolo. You destroyed your own saplings to turn us against each other. Nonna Elena saw you. The lie is over." Paolo looked at the lighter, his face momentarily losing its rigid structure. The blood drained from his face. Guido shifted uncomfortably. "You will never prove it," Paolo whispered, his voice shaking. "The word of an old, confused woman, the word of a spoiled, ungrateful child." "It doesn't matter what we prove in court, Paolo," Marco interjected, stepping closer. "The truth has been proved here, in the dirt. We are not marrying for your approval. We are marrying to keep the promise you broke, and we are not going to leave this place until we finish what Luca and Piero started." Paolo, defeated by the sudden united front, turned to his solicitor and waved his hand dismissively. "Fine. Then you will starve. You will exhaust yourselves. You will run out of money. I will watch you fail." He got back into his car, the tires spitting dust as he sped away, leaving the heavy weight of his failure behind. Anna and Marco stood side by side, watching the dust settle. The victory was immense, but the battle was far from won, and the money they had saved for their simple wedding was running out fast, eaten up by initial construction supplies and permits. Marco reached out and took Anna's hand, a firm, renewed clasp. "He's right. We will run out of money. We need a plan, a commitment that goes beyond stone." Anna looked at the blueprints, then at the vast, empty field adjacent to the church, the field Paolo had intended to use for her elaborate wedding feast. "The feast," Anna said, an idea sparking in her eyes. "We have hundreds of guests' worth of high-quality food already paid for and ordered for the cancelled wedding. We don't need a feast. We need a foundation. We will take the money from the unused food contracts, and we will turn this field into a community farm to support the restoration. We won't wait for the money to come to us. We will grow it." Marco squeezed her hand, a genuine smile finally breaking through his weariness. This wasn't just defiance, it was purpose. "The better harvest," Marco echoed, quoting the anonymous note. "We will use the ground that was meant for consumption and status to grow sustenance and community. We will use the land that symbolized the feud to symbolize the cure." The commitment was complete. They had chosen the hard road, the road of action and sacrifice. They would build their life not on the inherited wealth of the past, but on the honest labor of the present. Their vows would not be under the olive tree, but for the community. Anna và Marco đã đối mặt với Paolo, tiết lộ sự thật về chiếc bật lửa và hành động phá hoại. Họ từ chối sự đe dọa và quyết định dùng tiền và đất đai đáng lẽ dùng cho tiệc cưới xa hoa để xây dựng một nông trại cộng đồng, tài trợ cho việc phục hồi nhà thờ cổ, hoàn thành cam kết của họ. Hối hai kết thúc với quyết tâm dứt khoát. The launch of the Chiesa Vecchia project was not a grand ceremony, but a simple public declaration posted on the decaying wooden door of the old church. It detailed the new vision, the Piero and Luca Community Arts and Agriculture Center. The note explained that the funds originally intended for a lavish wedding feast would instead be used to build a communal farm and restore the church, creating a sustainable heart for the region. The project's mission was explicitly stated as honoring the vows of friendship. The community's reaction was seismic, a collective gasp of shock, followed by an explosion of whispered support. It was defiance made productive, rebellion made beautiful. Paolo Ferrari's reaction was incandescent. He saw it not as philanthropy, but as an act of public shaming, a permanent monument to his lie and his failure. He spent days trying to find a legal angle to shut down the project, but the land was legally complicated, the ownership murky, and the goodwill surrounding the project was too strong. Anna and Marco worked tirelessly. They had not been lovers for weeks, but partners. Their relationship was now forged in the mortar and the soil, stronger than any simple romantic attachment. Anna handled the planning, the permits, and the organization, leveraging her organizational skills as a teacher. Marco focused on the practical, the agricultural. He started with the soil itself, testing it, analyzing it, preparing the field where the wedding feast should have been. This land, the field of the great Feud, was now dedicated to shared crops, tomatoes, peppers, and new, fast-growing olive saplings. Crucially, Marco focused his expertise on the water system. Using his engineering and agronomy knowledge, he spent 3 nights working in the dark, not just unblocking the valve, but totally overhauling the communal irrigation channel. He modernized the failing old pumps and installed a simple fail-safe system that was transparent, efficient, and impossible to secretly divert or block. He did this silently, without informing anyone, as a final, clean act of clearing his family's name and restoring the integrity that Paolo had corrupted. The next morning, the fields on both the Ferrari and Vitali sides received water evenly, efficiently, and without any visible human intervention. It was a miracle of engineering, a silent forgiveness. The Ferrari foreman, Domenico, was the first to notice. He stood at the head of the row, watching the water flow perfectly, an expression of profound confusion and respect washing over his face. He knew who had done it. The silent offering of water was the final wedge that split Paolo's resolve. The economic advantage he had fought for, the control he craved, had been rendered obsolete by Marco's silent competence and grace. He had nothing left to fight. Anna was at the site when a familiar black Mercedes pulled up. Paolo got out, alone, without his solicitor. He looked utterly defeated, smaller than Anna had ever seen him, and he walked past the restored section of the wall, past the newly tilled field, and stopped where Anna was mixing cement. "The water," Paolo said, his voice flat, broken. "It is flowing perfectly. It is better than it has ever been." Anna stopped stirring the cement. She didn't look up. "Marco did that. He is an agronomist, Papa. He knows how to preserve things." Paolo stood there, staring at the fresh earth. "The farm hands are talking. They are bringing supplies to the church, Anna. The vitalists are helping. They are working together. You have shamed me." Anna slowly put down the trowel and finally looked at her father. His eyes were not angry, they were hollow, filled with a terrible, self-inflicted pain. "I didn't want to shame you, Papa," Anna said softly. "I just wanted you to see the truth. The shame began when you lied about Luca and Piero. The shame began when you destroyed your own saplings and framed the man I love." Paolo's breath hitched. He closed his eyes and a shudder ran through his body. He opened his eyes and the final barrier of his pride shattered. "I was so afraid," he choked out, the words raw and unrecognizable. "So afraid. Piero, he was my brother. He was supposed to stay. He was supposed to run the farm. But he chose the light, the camera, the dreams. He chose instability. And when I saw you, Anna, growing up, always sketching, always wanting to see the world differently, always looking at that old camera, I saw him. I saw you leaving me." Tears started to run down Paolo's cheeks, mixing with the dust and sweat. He did not wipe them away. "I lied to save you," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I lied to save the farm. I lied to stop you from choosing the emptiness and the loneliness that Piero chose. I knew the only way to keep you here, to keep you safe, was to make the choice unbearable. To make Marco, the only man you would ever love, into the enemy." He wasn't defending his actions. He was finally, painfully, explaining his motive. It wasn't malice. It was a desperate, misguided attempt to control his daughter's destiny, rooted in the trauma of losing his own brother. Anna walked toward him, her hands still smeared with cement. She did not hug him. She simply stood close enough for him to feel her presence. "Piero died because he couldn't fight you, Papa. He chose silence. I chose the fight, not because I don't love you, but because I love myself and Marco enough to know that fear is not a legacy." Paolo looked down at his daughter, seeing her for the first time not as an heir to be controlled, but as a courageous, independent woman. "I took his camera, Anna," Paolo confessed, his head shaking slowly. "When he left, I took the camera out of the chest and kept it hidden for a week, hoping he would come back for it. I was going to give it back, but he never came. I put it back in the chest, and I never told anyone." Anna finally understood why the camera had been in the chest, a ghost of her childhood. Paolo had been waiting for his brother, silently holding the token of his passion. Paolo turned, looking at the massive, ruined church wall. "What are you going to do with all of this?" "We are building the future, Papa," Anna said. The one you and Luca and Piero were too afraid to build. Paolo nodded slowly. He did not offer money. He did not offer an apology. He offered something much harder for a Ferrari. I will send Domenico, Paolo said, his voice barely a whisper. He will bring the old Ferrari scaffolding. It is the sturdiest in the region, and he will work for you, for the community. It was not a complete surrender, but it was the first olive branch, a tentative, awkward step toward repentance. Anna knew it was the most her proud, broken father could give. The feud was not over, but the lie that fueled it had died. Later that week, the sight of Domenico and 2 Ferrari farmhands arriving with a heavy flatbed truck loaded with Ferrari scaffolding, lumber, and buckets of tools was the true sign of catharsis. The 2 families, Vitali and Ferrari, were working side by side, awkwardly, silently, but working toward a shared purpose, under the shadow of the broken church. Paolo đã thú nhận sự thật đau đớn. Thừa nhận rằng sơ Anna rời bỏ mình như Piero nên đã gây ra bi kịch. Anna chấp nhận lời thú tội và không tha thứ, mà tập trung vào hành động kiến tạo. Paolo đáp lại bằng cách cung cấp giàn giáo và nhân công, bước đầu tiên để hàn gắn mối quan hệ. Marco đã sửa chữa hệ thống nước chung một cách âm thầm, xóa bỏ mọi nghi ngờ về danh dự. Nhịp điệu câu chuyện đang tiến đến cao trào cuối cùng. Months passed in a flurry of purposeful action. The Chiesa Vecchia, once a symbol of ruin and broken promises, was slowly, painstakingly resurrected, and the project, now funded by the sales from the community farm and the quiet support of both family businesses, became the soul of the village. The 2 families, Ferrari and Vitali, worked side by side, still awkward, still formal, but united by the stone and the mortar. Teresa Vitali, Marco's mother, brought lunch every day, a gesture of maternal care that Paolo's staff, including Domenico, gratefully accepted. The work was the truest form of reconciliation. A Ferrari would hold the scaffolding, steadying it for a Vitali to lay the stone. An ancient quarrel was literally cemented over. Anna and Marco's love deepened in the most unconventional way. They were 2 generals leading a peaceful, beautiful war against history. Their planning meetings were held over blueprints and soil samples, their affection expressed not in kisses, but in the shared exhaustion and the profound mutual respect in their eyes. They rarely spoke of the past, only of the immediate task, the pitch of the new community wing's roof, the soil rotation for the next harvest. Their confidence in each other was absolute, forged by fire. As the restoration neared completion, Anna and Marco decided the time was right. They would hold their wedding ceremony at the Chiesa Vecchia, beneath the newly restored luminous fresco, on the day that marked the 1-year anniversary of the broken engagement. The day arrived, bright and impossibly beautiful. The old church was filled with light, its stone walls glowing with the reverence of the restoration. The pews were filled with the entire community, Vitalis on one side, Ferraris on the other, but the dividing line was soft, porous, people talking easily across the center aisle. Anna walked down the aisle not in a lavish gown, but in a simple, elegant ivory dress she had made herself, holding a bouquet of wildflowers grown on the community farm. Her escort was not her father, but Nonna Elena, who, against all odds, was fully recovered, lucid and radiating quiet pride. Paolo watched from the front row, his face pale, but he nodded a silent acknowledgment to his mother and his daughter. Marco stood at the altar waiting, his eyes full of tears that were not of sorrow, but of overwhelming gratitude and love. He wore the same dark grey suit from the day of the first, failed engagement. The ceremony was brief, simple, and performed by the old village priest, who himself had witnessed all the generations of feuding. As they reached the moment of exchanging vows, a hush fell over the church. Nonna Elena, who had taken a seat in the front row, slowly stood up. The entire church turned to look at the frail, 82-year-old woman. "I have kept silent for too long," Nonna Elena said, her voice clear, strong, and melodic, cutting through the church's profound quiet. But on this day of truth, the final piece of the puzzle must be given its voice. She looked directly at Anna and Marco, a profound, knowing smile touching her lips. "The olive tree," Nonna Elena began, referencing the ancient tree in the Ferrari courtyard where Anna and Marco had made their first rebellious covenant. "The tree has heard the vows twice, I told you, and Paolo's great fear, the thing he tried to cover with lies about land and betrayal, was that you would forget the true meaning of that tree." She turned to Paolo. "Paolo, my son, do you remember the day you planted it?" Paolo, frozen in his seat, slowly shook his head, his eyes wide with a confusion that was rapidly becoming recognition. "It was not planted by your grandfather to mark the boundary of the Ferrari farm," Nonna Elena revealed. "It was a young sapling, a gift. You and Luca Vitali, Marco's father, planted it together on the day you both turned 10. It was your shared oath. The first vow, to nurture the land, to protect the friendship, and to build a life where the generations could stand together under its shadow." A collective intake of breath swept through the church. The great, ancient olive tree, the silent witness to the feud and the symbol of Ferrari's unyielding tradition, was actually a monument to the long-forgotten friendship of two boys, a Ferrari and a Vitali. The feud had literally been fought under the symbol of their shared affection. Paolo broke that promise, not to an enemy, but to his best friend, Nonna Elena said, her voice gentle. "He broke it out of fear, but you," she gestured to Anna and Marco, "you have found that promise, not in a written contract, but in the dust and the stone of this church. You have used your love to mend the friendship that was broken 30 years ago." She looked at the couple, tears now streaming freely down her face. "You have not broken tradition, my dears," Nonna Elena declared, her voice ringing with powerful finality. "You have remembered it. You have chosen the roots over the chains, and in that you have created your own honest tradition." The emotional climax broke over the congregation. Paolo covered his face with his hands, weeping silently. A catharsis of decades of guilt and repression finally released. Teresa Vitali reached across the aisle and placed a trembling hand on Paolo's shoulder, a gesture of silent, shared grief and forgiveness. Anna and Marcos looked at each other, the full weight of their redemptive journey reflected in their eyes. They did not need to say the prescribed words. Their life together, their shared work, their defiance, and their final act of truth was the vow. The priest, sensing the moment of profound spiritual communion, simply nodded, then let the new life begin. They exchanged rings, simple bands of hammered local gold, and kissed. A soft, true kiss that sealed not only their love but the healing of the entire community. Later, the community did not have a feast, but a quiet, humble celebration on the newly tilled community farm. Paolo approached Marco not to speak, but to hand him a simple, rolled-up document, the original deed to the small, rocky field that had been the official source of the 15-year-long dispute. He had quietly transferred the land to the Piero and Luca Community Trust. For the children, Paolo murmured, his voice thick. Let them play where we should have played. Le cuối thai nhà thờ cô đã phục hồi diễn ra. Cú twist cuối cùng được tiết lộ. Cây ô liu cổ thụ là biểu tượng tình bạn giữa Paolo và Luca, bị Paolo phá vỡ vì sợ hãi. Nonna Elena đã làm sáng tỏ sự thật, khẳng định Anna và Marco đã nhớ lại chứ không phá vỡ truyền thống. Paolo chuyển giao mảnh đất tranh chấp thành công viên cộng đồng. The wedding was not an end, but a quiet, powerful commencement. Anna and Marco did not leave Puglia for a honeymoon. They stayed, planting the first new row of heirloom tomatoes on the community farm. The disputed field, now a registered public park, stood between the Ferrari and Vitali properties, not as a barrier, but as a meeting ground. Anna continued her job teaching the local children, but her evenings and weekends were dedicated to the Piero and Luca Center. She managed the small art programs, using a corner of the newly restored community hall for simple lessons on light and perspective. Marco managed the farm, transforming the rich soil into a model of sustainable cooperative agriculture. The harvest became a shared endeavor, blurring the old lines of family ownership. The center was not yet financially independent, but it was self-sustaining, fueled by the dedication of the community. The last piece of Anna's personal journey was to fulfill the purpose of the camera. She spent several weeks filming, not sweeping vistas or grand architecture, but small, intimate moments. Marco's hands working the soil, Nonna Elena knitting by the window, the children laughing as they watered the new saplings. Her focus narrowed on the face of Nonna Elena. The resulting documentary was short, raw, and deeply moving. Anna titled it The Root and the Chain. The premiere was held in the large assembly space of the Piero and Luca Center. The community gathered, silent and expectant. Paolo Ferrari sat in the front row looking profoundly uncomfortable, but he stayed. The film opened on the ancient olive tree, its twisted, resilient trunk filling the screen. Nonna Elena's voice, clear and strong, Narrated Nonna Eleanor. Voice over. They told us tradition was a fortress, that it had walls and rules. My whole life I watched people use the old stories to justify the new cruelties. They feared change more than they feared the lie. The film cut to quick shots. The silver lighter lying on the dusty ground, the destroyed saplings, Paolo's anguished face. Then the black and white photos of young Luca and Piero smiling. Nonna Elena, voice over. But tradition is not a fortress. It is a root. It must be watered with honesty. When my son Paolo broke the promise he made to his friend, Luca, he did it out of fear. He saw the path of the heart, the path of Piero, as weakness. He chose the chain and put the burden of the lie on his own daughter. The film showed Anna and Marco, shovels in hand, working in the dirt. It showed the community farm, green and vibrant. Nonna Elena, voice over. My granddaughter, Anna. She did not fight the tradition. She remembered it. She found the first vow of friendship, the one planted under the tree by two little boys. She chose to build a future that honored the true past, not the invented one. The true tradition is not what you keep, but what you heal. The film ended on a simple, silent close-up of the ancient olive tree. As the lights came up, the room remained silent for a long, necessary moment. The air was thick with the weight of recognized truth. Paolo slowly stood up, turning to face the community. Then he did not speak about the film. He simply bowed his head, a gesture of quiet, public humility. The community, understanding that the powerful man had finally shed his armor, responded not with applause, but with a profound, murmuring acceptance. Anna stood beside Marco, her hand in his. A small tear tracked down Marco's cheek. He hadn't just gotten his love back. He had seen his father's honor restored. Later that evening, as Anna and Marco prepared to leave the center, Paolo approached them. He did not mention the film nor the ceremony. He simply handed Anna a small, heavy bit, beautifully wrapped. "It is a wedding gift," Paolo said, his voice flat but gentle. "A real one, this time." Anna opened the box. Inside was a brand-new, top-of-the-line digital cinema camera, the kind she had always dreamed of using. It was modern, precise, and expensive, a tool for telling the truth. "It is for the world," Paolo said, meeting his daughter's eyes. "Go, show them what we learned here. Show them how to remember." Anna did not thank him for the gift. She thanked him for the freedom. She hugged her father, a long, genuine embrace that was not about forgiveness, but about moving forward. The final scene takes place a few weeks later, at sunset. Anna and Marco are standing in the Ferrari courtyard, under the ancient, sprawling olive tree. Nonna Elena is sitting on the veranda watching them. Marco holds a copper watering can filled with water drawn from the newly restored communal well. Anna is beside him, her hands resting on the gnarled, thick trunk. They are watering the roots of the tree. Marco looks up at the vast, star-pricked sky. It never had a name, did it? Marco asks, smiling. This tree, just the olive tree. It didn't need one, Anna whispers, leaning into him. Its name was always the Vow. She reaches out and gently touches the lens of her new expensive camera, resting on a stone bench beside her. Anna, voice over. We did not choose tradition. We chose truth, and in the truth we found our own tradition. The chains are broken, but the roots are stronger than ever. They taught us that the greatest legacy is not what you own, but what you have the courage to build together. Anna and Marco finish watering the tree. They look at each other, their faces illuminated by the soft, fading golden light. They turn, their arms linked, and walk toward the new community center, leaving the ancient tree to hold the true vow, renewed and finally kept whole.